Data centers.
Data centers. Data centers. Data centers.
200 data centers.
1,000 feet from her backyard.
These data centers require the use of water
to release untreated wastewater.
She's handcuffed and physically removed from the meeting by police.
We need clarity, and we need it now.
A data center, to me, is a big building.
The data centers are just servers, thousands and thousands of servers.
Generally, it's what we call the cloud.
It's kind of like the race to the moon, it feels like, but on a much more dangerous level. I have a pond, and when the sun goes down, it reflects in the pond because it's on the west side of my property. And I remember thinking, wow, I think Sunbury is named Sunbury because we really know how to bury the sun. It was just really, it was like, aha, it's Sunbury. I'm Patty, and I grow native plants to help with habitat restoration for wildlife. Personally, I've never lived as an adult in a small town, so this has been really interesting for me. I've gotten to know most of my neighbors. Many of them come here to shop for plants, and I share out caterpillars to them. I've always liked the feeling of knowing the people that you live around. And I can say that the data center fight has actually made me feel even more connected to the community. I think that the data center will completely transform Sunbury because it'll become like an industrial town. I mean, it'll attract more of the same.
So I think Ohio has a fascinating history of deploying new technologies, and some of those technologies have been long-term beneficial for the state. Some of them bring short-term benefit to the state.
Since 2011, Republicans have been courting these data centers to come in here, giving them tax breaks. All the natural resources being used for these things that create so few permanent jobs has been an issue.
The amount of incentives that have been provided to these data centers is enormous. $2.7 billion in tax exemptions and credits have been given to these companies over the last 5 years. Those taxes are funds that local communities depend on to support their basic infrastructure.
We pay for the road damage, the infrastructure, we end up paying for all that. And it really should be them paying for it. They shouldn't be getting all these tax incentives because they don't need those. When they come into an area like this, they are going to use massive amounts of our resources, all of our resources.
It's the legacy of extractive industries. It's exactly what coal and gas and oil have done to Ohio for 200 years. You take the wealth out of the state, and when you're done with it, you wash your hands and go away, and the people in the state are left to pay all the costs.
So in Sunbury, the council members have decided to put in place an 8-month moratorium on the data center that would be coming into Sunbury's industrial park area. So it feels very coincidental that 8 months lines up with right after the elections. You know, it's not just happening in Sunbury, and it actually isn't even happening here yet. This is just the beginning of the process, but we're seeing this happen in Johnstown, in Hilliard, in Columbus, in New Albany. We're surrounded by it.
There are 3 data centers in Hilliard. The first data center is on Britton Parkway and Hayden Run Road. That's in a fairly commercial area. There wasn't any pushback. And the second data center is off of Cosgray Road. Those were built near a residential area, and some of those residents did come to the city council meetings and raise some concern. The pushback wasn't to the level that we're seeing on this data center. It abuts a residential neighborhood. There are train tracks that separate the residential neighborhood from the data center.
My relationship to the data center story is simply it's the neighborhood that I live in that is adjacent to the data center that's being built. It's the school that I took my kid to every day for elementary grades that is just a few football fields away from this data center project.
Not only are we going to have this big data center here, they're going to do something that's not done in the United States at this size and level ever anywhere with a fuel cell.
They're putting in fuel cells. To run the fuel cells, they have to run a gas pipeline into those fuel cells to feed them. The gas pipeline they're going to build for the Hilliard facility is an 8-inch pipe. At 9 inches, that would be controlled by other regulatory authorities. So they very carefully selected the size of the pipe to avoid a significant amount of regulation and oversight.
The fuel cell that they're putting in is the largest in the United States and will only provide 30% of the power that it needs. The next largest is in Seoul, Korea. So Seoul, Korea, Hilliard, Ohio. Population 50,000.
It exists under part of state legislation, Ohio House Bill 15. And Ohio House Bill 15 is a product of a supermajority Republican state legislature who's had power in Ohio for almost 20 plus years. And that's where this really takes the turn. This segmentation of this facility has created this environment where the Ohio EPA is stuck constantly saying, well, that's going to be covered in this meeting. That's going to be covered in this meeting. This segmentation has created a situation where the regulatory environment is not able to properly evaluate the full impact of the facility.
House Bill 15 changed some of the state laws, and in particular, who has a say on who can approve that variance. And it was taken away from not just the city of Hilliard, but all cities.
Something that they agreed to, now the whole project was changed overnight.
Those fuel cells every day will put out an amount of carbon dioxide into the air equivalent to 66,000 cars. If you're familiar with Hilliard, it's a community that could not stand 66,000 more cars driving through it every day.
What studies do you have? What do you know about this technology? Are we close enough to set the second largest fuel cell in the world next to a playground, next to a school, next to my house?
The backup power generation happens to be 158 diesel generators. Now, these diesel generators are constrained to emergency use, but when you look into that emergency use definition, there are very little constraints in it.
You know, a July 15th in Ohio with humidity and stagnant air and no breeze, and this is heavy gas, right? I mean, these CO2 diesel, if they're running diesel, you know, these are heavier gases, they're heavier than the air. That air is going to be, as lower to the ground, is going to be dirtier. And who's low to the ground? The people. So as we were talking about these 158 generators, well, they're only allowed to run them X number of hours a year. I think it's 100. Well, what if they run it for 101? What is the fine for it going above the allowable use? Is defined the cost of a wedding in Venice? Because if you can afford a wedding in Venice and to pay for the city, then maybe you can afford a fine where you're impacting 50,000 community members' air quality on a daily basis. It's kind of an absurdity of how come this one building needs that much power.
We're putting in a brand new technology run with natural gas lines. Does the local fire department have the equipment and training to respond to an emergency there? My son's a firefighter. I'd like to think he knew what he was going into when he has to enter one of those plants and know that his department has the equipment and the training to deal with it. That's not being addressed right now.
When most buildings come into a city, the fire department is usually aware of the layout of the building and what is in that building, right? Are they using any special gases? In this case, we don't have the plans. People just want to know they're safe.
I think a lot of times folks maybe outside of the rural universe don't understand the value of land or what it means to a farmer. That's our whole existence, whether it's milk or beef or dairy or corn or soybeans or so forth. It means so much to us. So the land is so important. You know, there's a lot of discussion, and it's a very appropriate and timely discussion about the environment. And folks, they look at water usage and they look at sewage usage and so forth of how water's going in and out. These are hyper-local issues. You have to take them individually of what's happening specifically locally. Our local data center is going to use city water. Our city has plenty of water usage for a number of new businesses, including the data center. I've looked at the city plans, and again, by the way, I'm not sitting here advocating for my local community's data center. I'm not on city council. I'm just a farmer. I'm nobody. We have to be able, as legislators, as councils, we have to be willing to walk away, push your chair back and say no, because we have something that you want, and it's important to us.
There are a number of questions that people need to ask about data centers before they're built, not after, but before they're approved. The first one is around water. Data centers use an enormous amount of water to cool the machines. All those servers in one place get very hot. Where's the water going to come from? How much of it is going to be used? And what gets done with it when they're finished? Usually they'll take it from sources that are also the same sources that we get our drinking water from.
I don't think it's a coincidence that there are over 200 established data centers in Ohio, and Ohio sits right at the shores of Lake Erie. Considering data centers need so much water daily to operate, if data centers are taking vast amounts of water and using them and contaminating our freshwater source, then who knows what the water source is going to look like in 30 years when people my age are living around this area and rely on that water source as their supply.
The fact is, we're worried about how much water they're using and what goes into the water when they discharge it back into the system.
Well, Ohio is in the top 5 states for states in the country that are building data centers. And we're already number 5 for the worst air quality and number 6 out of 56 states and territories for the most pollution introduced into our environment. So where is this going to take us to number 1?
The Ohio EPA, under Governor DeWine right now, has proposed that they will issue a general permit for all data centers, allowing them to discharge wastewater into streams, rivers, and lakes.
The potential for the environmental impact can't be known yet, and they're certainly not disclosing much.
Frequently, when they go into a local community, they make the local officials sign non-disclosure agreements where they can't talk about any of these details.
I mean, imagine that. Someone elected by the voters of Ohio in their district they're signing NDAs to keep the secrets of a private corporation from their voters. I think that's absurd.
When you're working for constituents who voted you into an office, I think NDAs are unethical. It feels like a big betrayal of trust.
Transparency is super important in communities that are being affected by data centers.
What's happened in Ohio now is that there's going to be a constitutional amendment, if it makes it to the ballot, to not only limit, but to outlaw, if you will, all data centers. And I think we miss the opportunities that we have here to grow tech, because this is what's coming. This is coming. We have to deal with it. We have to deal with it.
If the legislature fails to act on issues that voters want action on, people take those matters in their own hands and they go for constitutional amendments, because Ohio is one of those states that can still do that.
The government needs to focus, instead of making 200 data centers in Ohio, making 50 data centers in Ohio, using 200 big warehouse buildings that could become abandoned in 10 years and be torn down isn't the best route to go.
From my standpoint, it's never about no data centers. What I want to see is a community-minded data center. I want to see a data center where their name is on the t-shirt of a softball team. They need to be community partners where they're contributing to the arts, where they're contributing to the schools, where they create a park.
Everybody wants to do something now to leave their legacy, to be able to run for another office. That there's forward thinking is not something the legislature does anymore.
I think what you've seen in the legislature is a legislature that's become much more ideological. Part of that is a result of gerrymandering. And in Republican district, that means more conservative, more right-wing candidates do better.
Ohio, having been controlled by one party for so long, longer than I've been alive, is a bad thing because new ideas aren't necessarily being brought to the table.
That's a reason that we need to have balance. So as we govern, the only way to find balance in government is to have a dissenting voice that has power.
The districts do not represent fair districts. They are biased to ensure that the Republicans keep a supermajority. So changing that is a very heavy lift. Voters can still do it, but it means very tough campaigns and it means a lot of hard work.
If you were looking for a prime example of why one party having complete control over a state is a bad thing, you only need to point to the First Energy House Bill 6 bribery scandal.
HB 6 was intended to benefit one utility company, First Energy. They were in bankruptcy. They wanted to get bailed out. And the way they decided to do that was to make sure that one individual, Larry Householder, was elected the Speaker of the Ohio House. They spent $60 million basically to purchase seats for people who would vote for Larry Householder in the biggest bribery scandal in the state's history.
Ohioans have paid millions and millions of dollars because of that decision. The Republican speaker is now in prison, federal prison. One person committed suicide over that. So it has been a boondoggle.
We've convicted people for taking the bribes. We've yet to convict the people who gave the bribes. Part of helping First Energy was to provide subsidies to specific power plants, 2 coal plants, 2 nuclear plants. Every user of residential electricity in this state would have to pay, but you're paying for plants that were badly run because First Energy spent $60 million to elect a Speaker of the House.
And all of this was happening at the exact same time as Ohio Republicans were rubber stamping the proliferation of data centers across Ohio.
The Republican legislators, they're giving tax breaks to these things for 10 years that only create good jobs for the 2 years of being built, good union paying jobs. But after that, there are 5 or 6 people in these data centers, and the amount of energy they're using are the size of small cities. Unfortunately, my colleagues in the legislature have let this happen for far too long without trying to rein them in. Now with the pressure going on with the Constitutional Amendment, maybe my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will start realizing we have to rein this stuff in.
If your legislator is voting against our basic needs, then they need to go. It's really that simple.
I do think that opposition to the fuel cells of the data center has created allies where they wouldn't otherwise exist.
It doesn't matter where you stand on the political spectrum. If your community is under threat, the environment that you rely on for good health, that is something that we all care about.
At the end of the day, what they're looking for is honesty, integrity, and transparency in what they're being told and what's being agreed to. That's what they want. It's not that complicated.
One of the things that's happened too with this data center fight is it's reminded me how important it is to be informed and make sure you're voting for people that have the best interest for the community and the environment at their heart.
What I want to see happen is more people get involved because you can move the needle. We've done it here in Hilliard. The majority of the folks that voted for those data centers are no longer on council. Whether they wanted to be or not, they've been voted out.
The best way to learn how the sausage is made, the best way to learn how government works is to run for office and win that office and have to govern, because governing's hard.
The most important thing for people to do, whether they're young people like me or they're older or they're somewhere in the middle, is to go vote.